speaker of the night is Avery Francis, and her 3 fun facts are that she came in first and second once at Laser Quest. Not really sure how that works. She once slept in a tent for 3 months, and she tried out for Lion King, and she made it. Avery, come on up here and share your fuck up.
I don't want to talk about the tent situation, so if anyone asks about that, I'm not answering. I'm just kidding. I was traveling through New Zealand. It was way cooler than, well, actually way better than it sounds. So yeah, my name's Avery. Who here knows or has interacted with a recruiter before? Okay, who feels good about their interaction that they had with the recruiter? Okay, 2 people. Awesome. So yeah, I'm a recruiter. I have a lot of stories that I could share. I started my career in general labor recruiting and then have moved my way into the world of tech and working with startups. I have a lot of stories I could share about failures. I'm sure that some of you, maybe one of you, has probably gotten an email from me before that had a spelling error in it or whatever. But regardless, I'm not going to be sharing the stories of my failures as a recruiter. They're too close to home, and I feel like I should just keep those to myself from now on. But where I do want to start my talk is with Friends with Benefits. Who's familiar with this movie? So this is the most positive that a recruiter's ever been depicted in any sort of media or in TV. Mila Kunis plays a charming recruiter who does and pulls out all the stops to get Justin Timberlake's character to join a agency as an art director. So she does all sorts of things with him. They go for drinks, she takes him to cool house parties, she picks him at the airport with a sign, all the cool things. This is not the life of a recruiter. The story that they don't really tell in that is how recruiters get into the world of recruiting. And oftentimes it doesn't necessarily start off with, going through a traditional career, like a traditional educational track or going to a school program. Like, it doesn't exist. Most recruiters truly and honestly fall into what they do. So this is me. I have hair like Don King in this image. Also, me just kind of falling in like Pocahontas. That's the request that I made to the illustrator for this. But really, like, I dove right in, like, head first. I was in debt. I had dropped out of university. I was at the time working 3 jobs. I was working as a school photographer for Lifetouch. Anyone who's ever had a photo taken by a school photographer, that was me. I got really sick because I was picking up kids for 6 months straight. And then also I was working at Aritzia. Anyone who, I'm sure, ladies, whoop whoop, Aritzia, great place to shop. I was working there. I was working at a pub, which I got fired from, and I was also working at Apple One recruitment agency where I started hiring general labor folks. But I dove right in. I had to, out of necessity. I had no money, and I needed to put myself through school, and I owed my parents $20,000 for dropping out of school. So sometimes the best careers are unplanned, and that's what happened with me. It wasn't something that I planned on getting into, it wasn't something that I necessarily wanted to get into, but I went with it, and I just kind of went on with it with grace and as much tenacity as I possibly could. And through my years of working as a recruiter, now being 12th year of working as a recruiter, I learned how to navigate all the things that have to do with your career with, I'd say, was really, really good kind of skills. So everything from like interviewing to navigating from one job to the other to negotiating for more money. Once I was able to actually get a $40,000 increase from one job to another job, just simply because I asked. So I learned a lot about what it looks like to navigate your career, how to do it in a really great way, and how to get the best jobs, who to connect with, and how to make that happen. Now, the failure kind of starts here. I was feeling really jazzed. I was like, okay, I'm a recruiter, like, people actually kind of like potentially know a little bit who I am. I don't get treated like total crap, which is great, and I'm sorry to say this, but recruiters don't have a lot of respect. So I actually was in a position once where I was at the peak of my, not the peak, I thought at the time I was at the peak of my career. I was working with an amazing startup. I had done some really cool things. I was working as a director there. I was heading up HR as well, which isn't a common thing recruiters get the opportunity to do. and I had 3 job offers on the table. Now, I had an unfortunate situation that happened at work. I've shared this publicly, and I like to talk about it because I'm trying to destigmatize what it looks like, but I was sexually harassed within my previous company, and I was ready to make a move simply because I just wanted to get out. But I wasn't in the right headspace to make that decision. Regardless, I was still excited, and I was spoiled with choice. I had 3 startups that had offered me amazing job offers, and I went for the one that was the shiniest and sexiest offer. It was the one that came in at the 11th hour. I had met with 2 people, and by my time, I met with them at I don't know, 4 o'clock. By the time I got home, which was around 7, I had an offer in my inbox from this company. And I was like, okay, you know what? I absolutely got this. I'm gonna go for it. I was nervous. I knew that it was a decision that would either make or break my career, because being a recruiter, I feel like I've been a private investigator about what companies are worth going to, what bosses are worth working for, what founders are worth working with, and I knew that there was going to be potentially some tension, but I didn't necessarily know what I was getting myself into until I got there. So what I realized is that I had picked a lemon. And has anyone ever done this before with your career, where you've gone into the wrong role, wrong job, maybe you're sold the wrong thing? I'm telling the story today because I think it's important, and I do think that it's something that everyone has potentially ran into throughout their career. When I decided and learned that I had picked the lemon, it was on my 2nd day, which is very soon. I found myself crying in the bathroom, and I realized that my values didn't align with theirs. I think it was 25 people were laid off that day. It was really, really hard to work in an HR and talent department, caring a lot about fostering growth and building people up and employing the best people that the community has to offer, and then realizing that people are so easily disposable. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily how they approach hiring and firing, but this is genuinely what I was kind of hit in the face with. So fast forward, I don't know, 6 months. I was sitting in an office with my boss at the time, and I was bawling my eyes out. I felt like an absolute failure. Things weren't working. I just didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I was being properly leveraged. I didn't think I was actually utilizing my talents. And I felt like I was making an impact, but in the wrong way. I feel like I was just creating a lot of noise. So I sat across the room from her and I said, I'm too talented to feel this shitty at work every single day. And that was on the Friday. On the Monday, I had gone into work, and I was messaging my partner, who's here today, from Dublin, and technically on his way to Amsterdam, but anyway. I was messaging him, and I was saying, as I did for about 4 months, I think I'm going to quit today. Maybe I should just quit. Maybe I shouldn't turn up. And I would fantasize every single day on my drive in about quitting. Has anyone ever done that? I appreciate a good quitting story, seriously. So if anyone has an awesome quitting story, please tell me. But quitting is a really, really hard thing to do. It's a really hard thing to kind of walk away from a company that you felt like, okay, this is it. This is going to be an amazing opportunity for me, especially when you turn down to other really awesome opportunities as well. So I really struggled with it, but I fantasize about it. I think about it all the time. I drive to work and I think about how I was going to quit. Anyway, on the Friday, I had that conversation. I was in tears. I went in feeling not the best on the Monday, but I met Marcia, and that's where this failure fuck-up story starts. That is Marcia right there, by the way. I don't know if anyone noticed. So her and I met for coffee, and she asked me if I would speak at Fuckup Nights Toronto. And I was like, I responded within seconds, and I said, how about if I'm currently living my fuck up? What do I do about that? How do I talk about that? And she started laughing, and I was like, no, seriously, what do I do? I'm really nervous. I have no idea what I would do. It was like, I really want to be a part of Fuckup Nights, but seriously, I'm living my fuck up. So her and I had coffee. We continued on. I then rushed back upstairs. I kept thinking about what I was feeling. I kept thinking about how I wanted to proceed and what I wanted to do next. And I thought about that conversation. And this was me 2 hours later. I had a conversation with one of the founders and with my boss at the time, and I decided to end my partnership with that company. It's not something that I like to talk about often. It's actually not something I've ever talked about publicly. It was a really, really tough pill to swallow. I actually have my money tree there, I had a money tree that I had been nursing and I guess mothering for years. I got it when the worst boss I'd ever had left the company I was working with 4 or 5 years prior. She gave me the money tree and I was like, this is a good omen. I'm keeping this for the rest of my career. And I would say to people that worked on my team, like, if this money tree dies, I'm like E.T. Like, that money tree dies, I'm dead. So please, like, when I would ever go on a holiday or whatever, like, watch the money tree. That tree died by week 1 at that company, which is so weird. I'm not, like, superstitious, but I was like, the money tree's dead, what's going on? I brought it with me anyways because it was in a really cool pot. So, this was me afterwards. I felt like an absolute fuck up. I was really, really upset about the decisions that I had made to get myself there. I look back on all the conversations that I had. I thought about, where was it that I went wrong? What questions didn't I ask? What questions should I ask in the interview process? Why didn't I meet with more people? I thought that this was going to totally take a slam on my professional career. I'd literally just left one of the top startups in Toronto. I thought about what people would think. What are they going to ask me? How am I going to explain myself for this? And I mean, at the end of the day, nothing lasts forever. And this is true for failure. I did fuck up. I did make the wrong decision. I knew I was making the wrong decision. But I went with what I thought would be the right choice and what I thought people would think was the right choice. I kept asking so many people, where should I go? What company should I take? I have 3 job offers on the table. And just to be clear, this doesn't happen for recruiters often. We're not engineers. Who's an engineer? Product designer? You work in tech? Yeah, there's lots of opportunities and jobs kind of going and circulating around. This was a pretty unreal spot for me to be in. But regardless, it was then that I realized, although it was a tough decision getting me there, and although I was nervous about what people would think, what people think doesn't really matter. And this was mentioned earlier by Jeremy. I was so nervous going into the next phase of my career about what people would ask me. How was your experience there? Are you still connected with them? No one talks about it. I was nervous I'd be taken out of speaking engagements. I had 20 lined up for the remainder of the year. No one cared. I messaged every single organizer, hey, just so you know, I'm no longer with this company. You probably don't want me to speak with you in your organization anymore. So if you want me to not be part of it, I totally understand. And every single one got back to me saying, no, it actually has nothing to do with the company you're with. We want you there. So I had a really interesting lesson, and I think that it was really hard getting and coming to terms with the fact that I walked away and that I quit. But I took that lemon that I picked, and I thought about what I wanted to do with it next. And there was 2 things that came out of my experience working with that startup. And one was that I wanted to help people to navigate their careers in a meaningful way, and I wanted to help people to find themselves at the right spot. And then the second one was I wanted to help companies create meaningful and inclusive experiences for everyone that would join their organization. So, walking away was the biggest fuck up, I think, that I'd ever done, but it was also one of the biggest learning experiences. And who understands this reference? Yes? Ladies? Beyonce? Lemonade? Okay, awesome. That's hot sauce, but I've replaced it with my new company name. So I thought, what would Beyonce do? And I thought, what should I do next in terms of making this work? And how can I make a big impact and a positive impact in the world that I exist in? And how am I going to make a positive impact in my community as well? And it was through those lessons and through that fuck up that I failed upwards. And I failed my way into a career of entrepreneurship and owning my own business and helping to make positive impacts with the companies I support and partner with, which are the top startups in Toronto, helping them to level up and to hire the best people, but also to make the best experiences for the employees that they bring on board and that they hopefully provide meaningful career opportunities to. So yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Honestly, I remember that conversation that we had, and I think it was about a year ago, and we really had this heart-to-heart about some of our fuck-ups. I was currently going through a really bad career fuck-up of my own, and I'm really glad that that conversation actually helped you pivot and ultimately sort of led you to entrepreneurship. So congratulations on where you are now, and thank you so much for sharing those lessons. So let's open it up to Q&A and get some great questions for Avery. questions. We have really awesome people.
So nervous.
If you took one of those other jobs, you think one day you'd still end up doing your own company?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, it was actually, the decision was really tough because it was between working with my mentor. Her name's Maria Cataranga. She was working at Nulogy prior, where they wanted to offer me one of the jobs, and now she's working at Kira Talent, and she's like probably one of the best HR talent people leaders I've ever worked with. And then also the other opportunity was for money. So yeah, one lesson, pick mentorship and the people that you're gonna be partnering with over money, always.
Thank you so much for sharing. One thing you said in your second date was that your values were not on par with the company. Are there any questions that you'd recommend as a recruiter when you're going into an interview process that you should ask to get that alignment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that asking, one of the best questions that I have is asking what's a value that you live, work, and play by, under any circumstance you still stay true to. I think that this will help for them to kind of dive in on what it is that they really, really kind of value, but then beyond that, out of all the values that they pick, which one's most important to them, both at work and life. It was a question I didn't ask that now I ask when I partner with clients, and when I look at other startups to potentially help to support.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks for sharing. What do startups look for that's different from regular corporate established corporations?
That's a great question. So I think that depends on the startup. I work and partner with a lot of different startups in Toronto that are looking to hire the best talent that the world has to offer. I think that there's some standard things are grit and being humble, being really intelligent and talented, but also being able to collaborate really well with other folks. I think that another thing that they look for is really great stories of failure. There was one I'm gonna shout out to Guy, who's I know Alicia. Guy's the founder over at Setter. They're a home services company. I don't like saying the Uber equivalent, but they're kind of like the Uber equivalent of the home services world. If you're interested in getting anything fixed in your apartment, check out that app. Regardless, Guy actually asked a lot of questions about what's a big failure that you had and how did you bounce back from it. And the conversations that he's gotten through those questions have been really, really insightful for him to understand how flexible someone can be, how much tenacity they have. So I appreciate how he values that, and that's something that we asked at League and at Wrangle when I worked with them as well. So, yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Also in the spirit of Fuckup Nights, talking about failures. Oh, yes.
That was awesome. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to that. What's the difference between having a really bad day at work, because everyone has streaks of bad days or streaks of bad weeks, versus knowing for sure it's time to leave?
Okay, so I've had this experience. I think a bad day at work is when you feel exhausted, you have a bit of a migraine, your eyes feel like they're gonna roll out of your head. Maybe you have a couple bad interactions with people, maybe you don't feel like you're accomplishing much, et cetera, et cetera. I think that would be a bad day. I think a really bad day when you feel like you have to leave is when you feel physically bothered. Maybe physically ill, maybe it's causing you stress. I think that without going into too much detail, I've heard many stories of people losing hair, developing rashes. I think if you're having a physical reaction truly to experience or an environment that you're in, that's probably a sign that you should go. But I also think that if you're finding yourself crying in the bathroom like I was, or crying in meeting rooms like I was, and that's probably a sign that you should potentially go. Also, sometimes it's just something as simple as a feeling. If you're really, really resilient, and maybe you're not someone that's going to cry in the bathroom, maybe you're not someone that's you maybe have the home life settled, so you don't feel it that much. I feel if you don't feel like you belong there, and that's what I felt on day 2, then that's probably a good indicator that you should maybe look. And I think the biggest thing is that there's so much stigma around shouldn't leave the job before 6 months or before a year because it's not for me. But for me, I feel the the probationary period should go both ways, right? If the company can fire you within 3 months for any reason, then you should be able to leave within 3 months without any sort of like, bad kind of tack against your career journey. And I feel like if we talk more openly about, maybe going to a company that wasn't for us, for whatever reason, then maybe there would be less of a stigma around it. So yeah. Oh, sorry, I'm just like.
So we'll do 2 more.
I would say kind of as a follow-up to that, I think it's kind of, even if you feel that you're in the wrong situation, it's kind of difficult the earlier you are in your career, obviously.
Yeah.
Because I think once you're later on, you get to a position where you're like, well, I can find another job. But earlier on, I would say, like, ask, like, basically, is there a point where you should just kind of, like, put in the months? Or, because, yeah, I mean, there is the concern about leaving before 6 months or something, but if you're early on in your career, like, is there a value to just kind of sticking it out?
Yeah. So I have 2 kind of responses to that. The first response is I understand that not everyone is in the situation where they can pick up and leave and quit their job. Like with my personal situation, I was financially in a place where I could do that, and then also from a career perspective, I've been working away at my career for 10 plus years. So I was in a position, similar to what Jeremy mentioned, to actually, if I wanted to, like, go back to something without feeling like, even though I was struggling with it, feeling like would make a big kind of burn towards my career. But you have to think about what you're looking to get out of it and where you want to go. I think that if it's always good to continue networking, to have conversations. I'm not saying you should always be applying for jobs, but kind of putting your feelers out there to see what else is there could be valuable to you while still working away at where you're at. But if you're looking and if you're in a position where you're not necessarily feeling it, but you're getting like the kind of growth opportunities that you're looking for, maybe you're getting really supported by an awesome boss, or you're working with great people, and it's not killing you, then sure, stay a couple extra months. But I also think it's always good to, like, if you're not entirely happy, think about how you could get out and what you could be doing to get yourself there. The problem is there's no guarantee. Even if you're really happy where you are and you want to move and transition into something new, that might not, and that's the fear, right? It's almost better being with the devil that you know than the devil that you don't, which is what my mom always says, but yeah.
I think we had 1 more. I saw another hand up.
You more answered the question, but it was a lot of people, or at least a lot of people that I've talked to, it's always they'd rather bridge the gap. So they'd rather stay at a company until they find something else. Yeah. What sort of was your thought process of, I need to quit, I can't stay in this anymore, instead of staying for a little bit longer until you had something else?
Yeah. I think that when you're in a senior leadership role, the impact of not being engaged in what you're doing is, and especially in my job, I was leading talent, right? Hiring people for a company that I wasn't down with is a really, really hard thing to do. And for me, I'm very open and honest, and I'm very authentic in the way that I like to communicate with people. So I found that kind of bubbling up in the conversations I was having. And for me, the indicator was I was actually speaking to someone that I had worked with previously that was like, oh my gosh, Avery, I have to come and join you, I really want to work there. And I just said, hey, listen, I'm going to be honest with you. This is what's happening. If you still want to join, go for it. But that's when I was like, I'm not actually doing my job. I'm doing the opposite of my job. So to answer your question, I think that, it's challenging, navigating that next step, and especially if you're more junior or earlier into your career, making those decisions. But I think at the same time, if you have a great boss and you're with great people, and maybe it's just not the role, then maybe stay a little bit longer, but try to find that next move for you in between. I'm a huge, if you were to look at my LinkedIn, you'll see I've jumped around, and I've done so because of situations I've been in that weren't necessarily the best for me, and I've grown so much in my career because of it. Financially, professionally, with more growth opportunities, so I'd say go move. I think it's worth the risk, for sure. Especially if you're going from one job to another. Going to entrepreneurship is harder, and when I did it, it was kind of a force, I just had to. And I'm happy I did. I also had a great support system of other people I was going to partner with to make it an easier decision.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was like a long-winded answer. My mouth is very dry.
Okay, awesome. I think that's a really great place to end.